Hello everyone, thank you for joining Python Data Science Day on P-Day held by Microsoft. Today we will be talking about streaming data preparation with Pydantic. Fasten your seatbelts, we are starting. I'm Hassan from Istanbul, Turkey. With over 4 years of software development experience, I have spent 2 years in data analytics and engineering and rest of them as a software development engineer. Let's get started about Pydantic. Brief overview of Pydantic. Let's imagine a case where there's 20 million of rows, 300 columns, and you need to model, validate, and serialize this data to serve machine learning engineers, to data analytics engineer. And if you are working in a company where there is only 10 people, this case can come to you pretty inappropriate or unusual. But if you are working within a company where there is data going on every day on basis, and if your main focus is data, that's a pretty usual case. In most simplest way, I can see any company order table pretty looks like this. What would you do in that case? How would you validate 300 columns? How would you model these 300 columns and make sure this serializable? You can serve as a relational or in JSON format. How would you achieve this goal? You can, of course, for each situation, write some custom functions. Would it be faster or not? Or you can just look into Pydantic. Most widely used data validation library for Python. Fast and extensible, linters are suitable, and the most importantly, Pydantic define how data should look like. You can define each constraint of your columns, like a mean value, max value. Should it be string? Should it include alphanumeric characters? Does URL valid or not? Everything already included in Pydantic. Just you need to learn how to use it. Why do we need to use Pydantic? Why don't we just write each time some user-defined function? Because of if you are really good at Python, you may be aware of typing packages, which is probably introduced after 3.6. And then with this library, you can define for each variable types. Like, for example, you want your name variable should be string, or you want your, number variable should be integer, and so on. And this is basically limiting the user to type other type. Of course, in Python, it doesn't limit, but in Pydantic, if you define your field type as a string, it's only accepts string and so on. And the other reason is, like I mentioned it earlier, do you really believe that your custom function would be fast enough? Like here we are talking about 20 million of rows, not like 10 rows, etc. That's why it's a pretty challenging. Because Pydantic version 2, which is recently introduced, written by Rust, and it is, if you compare with the competitor, 5 times more faster than them. And the other reason, like the JSON schema support, like you can easily serialize any data which you map with Pydantic. You can dump in the dictionary or Python primitive type, or you can dump into NoSQL suitable formats and so on. And therefore, of course, it's a serializable. And the other interesting facts, like approximately 8,000 packages on PyPy published using Pydantic. Somehow they are dependent. Maybe they are mainly dependent, or maybe indirectly. And hundreds of organizations in the world using Pydantic, including fun companies like, for example, OpenAI, NSA, NVIDIA, Microsoft, and so on. And if you ask me how Pydantic simply looks like, you can see on the left down, like you define in a class where you inherit model from Pydantic.base model, and then you just write in your each field. Like, for example, event should include, for example, title, date, is online, sponsored by who, etc. And you just, like in this example, as you may see, pass in the sorry, I'm kind of flu. You just pass in the dictionary by using this double star. It's kind of dictionary unpacking. Let's get into some numbers. Regarding the PyPy stats, Pydantic has monthly approximately 150 million of downloads, and 90 of 25 Nasdaq companies actively using Pydantic in their daily developments. And it is one of the interesting facts because it's not common to see open source packages getting some investment. But recently, Pydantic received $4.7 million investment by Sequoia. And regarding the Sequoia, they are planning to extend capability of Pydantic and maybe publish on cloud, which is accessible more easy. And as I mentioned earlier, it is written by Rust, so 5 times faster than enemies or competitors, how you say. And if you are into software development, you may already know it. Actively, everyone developing APIs, microservices which return JSON, or the exam are going to be forgotten. Let's dive into concepts of Pydantic. In the most simplest way, Pydantic has 4 different core concepts, like models, fields, serialization, and validators. What are the models? Models share many similarities as Python data classes with some important core differences, such as validation, serialization, JSON schema generation. And models, in most simplest way, is a class where inherit from the Pydantic base class. And if you ever wrote any code in C, it may look like a C struct type, because in C also you almost define in the same type. And what I'm defining here looks like on here. You importing from Pydantic base model, you're defining typical Python class, and you just inheriting from base model, and in the down you are writing each field which is needed. And the other thing is a fields. Fields are function to use it to customize your field of your model. For example, you have a name field in your model, and just how you want the name should look like. Should it be string? Should it has how many characters? Do you want some special requirement in your name, like it should only has lowercase, alphanumeric, etc. And this is where you need to use fields, because you can add a lot of metadata and as well as capabilities and limitations to make sure your data look like as you want. Other great feature of Pydantic is it will make your any data serializable. If you receive a JSON, you can easily serialize, or like even if you didn't receive JSON, let's imagine that you get your data by scraping via Beautiful Soup from different sources, and you want to make it easily accessible, like as a relational and so on. So you can just map with Pydantic and then convert to any type you want, like a relational, NoSQL, etc. And if you ask me how fields look like, you can see on the left, right down, like you can add a lot of metadata as description, title, and you can add constraint, GT, min length, max length, etc., and as well as regex. And serialization, as I mentioned, you can easily switch your data to core Python dictionary or JSON and so on. And it is like just you need to write model_dump or model_dump_JSON, and it will be default serialized. And the greatest another thing is the validators. Like I say, let's even forget about the edge case. Let's think that just table with 100 rows, 3 columns, and let's assume it's a ID, name, ID, URL, and email. ID maybe is the easier one. You will write some simple min-max constraint, but URL, maybe you don't want someone enter fake URL. So what do you need to do? You need to find from Stack Overflow or from ChatGPT a lot of code block and make sure it is working, and then you need to write some custom function to validate URL. Or maybe you just want HTTPS, so you need to add also this constraint. And as well as email. Okay, you need to again write some regex validator, then you need to say I'm only accepting following domains and so on. And like everything, as I'm saying, is a doable, surely. But is it faster? Is it not time consuming? Surely it's time consuming and it's not faster, as you can imagine, Pydantic. So that's where Pydantic helps you. You can validate your data and put into form what you want. Let's dive into our demo. Today in our demo, we are planning to crawl data from GitHub API and load into SQL after transferring the form that we want. And summary of our data, summary of our demo, we will be fetching user data from GitHub API, then define Pydantic models to represent data in the form which we want, validate the information that we received, and load into SQL data. On the right, you can see how GitHub API result looks like. Like you can see about the person, which is me, login, which is equal username, ID, which is not important, node ID still, which is not important, URL, which is photo of my profile, followers, what more pretty interesting, all this metadata, name, company, blog, location, the created date, when I created my account, updated date, when I recently put it something into. So that's pretty different data type and a lot of interesting things like email, URL. So let's dive into how it looked like. The first thing to do, surely write some function to get the data. So by using request, which is written by Kenneth Reyes, we basically wrote some get request function, and then as you see here, first we're sending request to user endpoint, then we're sending request to repository endpoint, then followers endpoint, and gist endpoint, and we just joining all of them in the users JSON data. And if everything goes good, we have a JSON which includes user metadata, repositories, followers, and gist. If not, just some error message. Let's write the repository and gist Pydantic model. And please pay attention the fields on the code base, the typing, date time, LIs, and GA, GT, LA, LT. For example, okay, in the repo full name, it's as usual, just we are receiving the repository full name, and we are using field because we will have some configuration in our data. And as you see here, as a default, which means if nothing comes, just put nothing. We just put in 3 dots. And as LIs, which mean if I will directly pass JSON files, I want full underscore name will map with repo full name, as well as HTML underscore URL will map with repo underscore public URL. This is where we need to use LIs. And here's what's more interesting, number of stars and created at. Number of stars, as you may guess, if you develop something pretty interesting, can be 100, can be 1,000, etc. But surely it cannot be less than 0, right? Because nobody can put you down. You will have 0 just. So we are adding basic and simplest limitation, greater equals 0. So it means that if we met end of the day, it should be at least 0, not more. If no, it will receive validation error. And created and unupdated that, if you work it with Redshift or SQL, it is the same exactly time step format. So we are saying that the data we will receive, it will be in the time step format, and we are using datetime from datetime import datetime. And the topics, basically, let's assume that you wrote some pretty interesting repository and they are keeping the text about your repository. So it is what is about. So it's a list of strings. Let's look at also GIST model. We are also creating some class and inheriting from base model from Pydantic import base model. And here everything same, just which is interesting and which we see first is a GIST underscore public URL here. Also here, sorry, maybe I forgot to mention. Here is pretty interesting thing. Like I said, someone can enter fake URL, and surely GitHub doesn't care. It's like they don't validate. They just taking the input and putting as a metadata, because end of the day you are the person who will show your repository beautiful, not the GitHub. But let's assume that this is pretty critical for us, so we need to make sure it is valid and it is real URL. So if there is no Pydantic, what we need to do, we need to write some regex validator, then we need to write, okay, except on HTTP, except on HTTPS, or which is finishing with .root, .tr, etc. But with any URL type, you can easily do this. You just wrote it as a type and then continue as it is. Of course, in that case, I just had typical general URL limitations and constraints. It can accept HTTP, HTTPS, and no more limitation. And here is the on the left down, you can see some simplest error situation. For example, I tried and take a screenshot from the code, which is the false. And here we are receiving validation error about the Stargazer count, because where it is here, yeah. To show you, I especially set it this JSON data -5 or -10. I don't know what is set it here to show it can occur error. And as you see here, it's saying that Stargazer count should be greater than 0, because that time I set it GT equals 0, so it should be at least 1. Let's look at the next page. Here is also, we are of course basically developing, creating two different model, and here's one and two things pretty interesting is first inheritance from other model, and more complex validations like patterns, min-length, max-length. Firstly, it's like about we are keeping information about follower data model. We are basically keeping the username, user public URL, and user avatar URL. And about URL, things still same. We just type setting to type to any URL, and alias HTML URL, avatar URL. But about the username, it is still same, and I will do this in the down page. I get this information from GitHub official documentation. GitHub username may only contain alphanumeric characters or hyphens. So it's like, for example, it cannot be question mark or I don't know quota. And in the next one, class user, it's like in the Pydantic way. In user model, what we are doing, instead of inheriting from the base model, we are inheriting from the follower model. And the reason we are doing this, because my user model already has this three field: username, user public URL, and user avatar URL. So of course I can be dumbass and then just duplicate my code, but instead of doing this, I take advantage of inheriting from the model. So when I inherit, I will already have all the features of base model and all these three fields. This is the greatest another thing about Pydantic. And here, all number of fields should be greater equals 0, because you cannot have -5 followers or following or repositories or GIST. And about Twitter's username, it's a pretty interesting, because here we are using pattern. In previous version it was called regex parameter, but they changed it as a pattern parameter. We are validating Twitter username, because like I said, GitHub doesn't validate that your Twitter username or valid or not, because it's a pretty costly for them. They just getting the information what you enter. And regarding the Twitter documentation, username must be between 4 to 15 characters and should only contain letters, number, and underscore. So to do second condition, we are writing just pattern. It should be my lower AZ, upper AZ, 0, 9, or underscore. And to achieve between 4 to 15, we are just setting min length and max length. So it will validate the information, and if it's not true, it will just return false. That's a pretty fast solution, and it will save us writing for each on use case some custom validator. And we developed already our models: user model, follower model, repository model, GIST model. So let's initialize our model. If you remember our first demo page, which I showed our JSON data, it is equal exactly this user data. User data kept this API request response. And what only we do here, instead of this equal this equal this, we just using dictionary unpacking. This double star mean like unpack this dictionary with user model. And it is only thing this dictionary unpacking do, mapping our K with our model K. So when this code run, within seconds, everything already initialized. Another thing what we can do, like I said, okay, we initialized our model, everything working good. If there is no error, throw it. The second thing is like, okay, let's assume that we are working with NoSQL database. We can simply just dump to JSON file or S3 or Amazon, Microsoft Blob storage, and then take advantage of this simple solution. As well as if we are running some machine learning model, we can take advantage of pickle.dumps and our model. I also would like to show you some advanced parameters of model _dump _JSON. Let's assume that, okay, we developed this ATL flow by using Pydantic, and then middle of our process, we received some requirements from business. They want to exclude some fields. We have two ways. First, remove from the model this field. It will solve our problem, but maybe one business team requires this field, one business team doesn't require this team. So by using model.json exclude parameter, you can basically pass fields what you don't want, and it will be excluded from your final result. As well as if you only want to include specific one, it's like it depends on if you have 310 of them need to be included, of course you will use include. But if 10 of them need to be excluded, you will use just exclude parameter. And there's a lot of like the warning in case of failure, you want warning or not. Or for example, in that it's also pretty interesting one. You know, like that's maybe one of the irritating thing about JSON. Sometimes when you dump data, it's like a pretty ugly. You need to use some, how it's called, B2Fire to see your data. Pretty interesting. So instead of using this, you can set indent as you wanna set like a more readable. So you can set, for example, for it will be each time when dive into next, we'll set like for indent like this. And this is all about our demo. Of course, I will show you next one, just SQL, but it's a briefly, which is not the core thing about our demo. We, as you remember, created 4 different models, like to keep GIST, to keep repository, to keep follower, and to keep user. And we also right now need to define relationship to map with our models into SQL. So as you may imagine, one user can have 0 or 100 repositories. So it's like a user to repository one-to-many relationship. As well as one user can have 0 or 100 followers. So it's also one-to-many relationship. And as well as one user can have more than one GIST or nothing at all. That's why it's also one-to-many relationship. Like it is simple. You just need to write same field as a create statement, create table, GIST, and the field 1, field 2, field 3. That's a pretty straightforward solution. That's why I'm not including in the demo this SQL part. But like you see within like 5 minutes, we get our data, fastly map our data, the format what we want, and we wrote directly fast validations. and it's ready to load SQL or ready to serve to machine learning engineer teams. And here, like for example, on the top, I get this screenshot from JSON Hero, which is pretty good tool to beautify the JSON result. All these fields except repository, gist, and follower come from the first API call, and these gists, followers, and repositories come from other API calls. End of the day, our user data looks like this. And here also from JSON Crack screenshot, like to show the tree of our JSON. So if you need to validate and get fast results, it's a pretty good idea to take advantage of Pydantic. Thank you for listening our demo. If you have questions, please let me know in the chat so I can freely help you. And what are the other things I would like to say you? Like I said, Pydantic is pretty nice solution about defining model, validating model. But if you ever developed any REST API with Fast API, you may already aware of Pydantic because it's also in Python. In Fast API, it's pretty often it is used and helping to define the return type or input type of your like REST application. So not only receive the data and deal with the data, but also to define your input model, you can use Pydantic. And also, as well as the recently, as you may realize, LLM model become pretty interesting and famous. And regarding the comparison, if you pass your prompt as a Pydantic model, like in each different field, define the different requirements, you will receive better results. So if you basically send to ChatGPT some code by using Pydantic, it's possible that you will receive better results. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day. Cheers.